The English Civil War, a period of intense conflict, remains a pivotal moment in British history. This war, which raged from 1642 to 1651, was not just a series of battles, but a profound struggle over the very nature of governance and authority in England. At the heart of this storm stood King Charles I, whose belief in the divine right of kings set him on a collision course with Parliament. Charles I's insistence on ruling without Parliament and his attempts to impose unpopular taxes and religious reforms fueled widespread discontent. Parliament, representing the interests of the gentry and merchants, was determined to curb the king's absolutist ambitions. They sought to limit his power and ensure that the monarchy could not operate without the consent of the governed. This struggle for power and control led to a series of confrontations and political maneuvers. The stage was set for a showdown, a clash that would redefine the relationship between the crown and Parliament forever. The war saw families divided, communities torn apart, and the nation plunged into chaos. Key battles such as the Battle of Edgehill and the Battle of Naseby were pivotal moments that shaped the course of the conflict. Join us as we explore the causes, key events, and lasting consequences of this defining chapter in British history. From the rise of Oliver Cromwell and the execution of King Charles III, to the eventual restoration of the monarchy, the English Civil War left an indelible mark on the nation's political landscape. Discover how this turbulent period laid the groundwork for modern British democracy and constitutional monarchy. The seeds of discord between Charles I and Parliament were sown long before the first shots were fired. Charles, ascending the throne in 1625, inherited a legacy of mistrust and tension. His belief in the divine right of kings manifested in his autocratic governance, bypassing Parliament and raising funds through arbitrary means. Parliament, emboldened by the growing influence of the merchant class, saw themselves as guardians of the people's liberties. The clash between the king's desire for absolute power and Parliament's determination to limit it formed the crux of the conflict that erupted in 1642. Religious tensions played a significant role in fueling the flames of discontent during Charles I's reign. Charles's marriage to Henrietta Maria, a Catholic princess, further inflamed religious sensitivities. Under her influence, Charles appointed several prominent Catholics to high office, deepening Protestant fears. His attempts to impose high Anglican uniformity on the Church met stiff resistance from Puritans. Archbishop William Laud's persecution of dissenters only served to deepen the religious divide and push England closer to civil war. The clash between Charles I and Parliament over governance and religion was fueled by simmering discontent among the common people. This discontent was not just political but deeply rooted in the everyday struggles and hardships faced by the populace. England in the early 17th century was undergoing significant social and economic transformation. The country was transitioning from a feudal society to a more modern economy, which brought about both opportunities and challenges. Rural areas saw changes in agricultural practices, while urban centers experienced growth and the rise of new industries. Inflation eroded the purchasing power of ordinary people, making it increasingly difficult for them to afford basic necessities. The rise of a new merchant class, who amassed wealth through trade and commerce, challenged the traditional social order dominated by the aristocracy. This new class of merchants began to wield significant economic power, further exacerbating social tensions. Charles's policies, perceived as favoring the wealthy, did little to alleviate the plight of the common man. His court was seen as extravagant and out of touch with the realities faced by the majority of his subjects. The common people felt increasingly marginalized and ignored by a monarchy that seemed more interested in maintaining the status quo than addressing their grievances. His attempts to raise revenue through arbitrary means, such as ship money, were deeply unpopular. Ship money was a tax traditionally levied in coastal areas during times of war, but Charles extended it to the entire country, even in peacetime. This move was seen as an overreach of royal authority and sparked widespread protests and resistance. By the late 1630s, England was a powder keg of discontent primed for rebellion. The combination of economic hardship, social upheaval, and political disillusionment created a volatile environment. People from all walks of life, from peasants to merchants, began to question the legitimacy of Charles's rule and sought change. The stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the future of England. The year 1642 marked a turning point in English history. The immediate trigger for the conflict was Charles's attempt to arrest the 5 members of Parliament, igniting widespread outrage. Charles fled London, seeking to rally support for his cause. Both sides began to raise armies, dividing the country between parliamentarians and royalists. The first major engagement, the Battle of Edgehill in October 1642, proved indecisive. It set the stage for 4 years of brutal conflict that would engulf England. The English Civil War raged across the countryside, drawing in men from all walks of life. The early years saw both sides struggling for supremacy, with neither able to deliver a decisive blow. The tide turned in favor of Parliament in 1644 with their victory at the Battle of Marston Moor. The following year, the Battle of Naseby sealed the fate of the Royalist cause. The war had a devastating impact on England, leaving a legacy of bitterness and division. The countryside was ravaged, towns and villages plundered, and trade disrupted. As the tide of war turned in favor of Parliament, Charles I found himself increasingly isolated. In May 1646, Charles surrendered to the Scottish Covenanters, hoping to exploit their divisions. The Scots handed Charles over to the English Parliament in exchange for money. Charles, now a prisoner, attempted to play off different factions against each other. However, his machinations proved futile. The king had sown the wind and was about to reap the whirlwind. The capture of Charles I presented Parliament with a profound dilemma. The radical wing of the parliamentarians demanded the king's head, arguing he had forfeited his right to the throne. In January 1649, the Rump Parliament voted to put Charles on trial for treason. The trial, held in Westminster Hall, was a highly charged affair. On January 30th, 1649, Charles was found guilty of high treason and sentenced to death by beheading. The execution of Charles I sent shockwaves throughout England and across Europe. The execution of Charles I marked a watershed moment in British history. On January 30th, 1649, a large crowd gathered to witness the public execution of a king. Charles spent his final hours in prayer and contemplation, addressing the crowd briefly before his execution. He forgave his executioners and uttered his final words before the axe fell. The executioner's proclamation, "Behold the head of a traitor," sent shockwaves throughout England. It was an act of regicide that shattered centuries of tradition and ushered in a new era of uncertainty. Following the execution of Charles I, England entered a period of unprecedented transformation under the Commonwealth. The monarchy and House of Lords were abolished, leaving the House of Commons as the sole legislative body. Oliver Cromwell emerged as the dominant figure, implementing social and religious reforms. However, his rule was marked by both progressive reforms and authoritarian tendencies. The Commonwealth, despite its short-lived existence, represented a radical experiment in republicanism. Following Cromwell's death in 1658, the Commonwealth began to unravel, paving the way for the restoration of the monarchy. The English Civil War, which raged from 1642 to 1651, left an indelible mark on British history, redefining the relationship between the monarchy and Parliament. This tumultuous period saw battles that pitted royalists against parliamentarians, leading to a profound transformation in the governance of the nation. The execution of Charles I in 1649 was a watershed moment, establishing the principle of parliamentary sovereignty over the divine right of kings. This act sent shockwaves through Europe, signaling a shift in power dynamics that would influence future generations. The war also led to greater religious toleration for Protestant dissenters and transformed the Church of England. The Puritans, who had long sought reforms, found new opportunities to practice their faith openly, leading to a more diverse religious landscape. Beyond the political and religious upheavals, the Civil War shattered the old social order, paving the way for the rise of a new class of merchants and entrepreneurs. This emerging middle class would become the backbone of Britain's economic expansion in the centuries to come. The English Civil War was a pivotal chapter in the ongoing struggle to define the relationship between rulers and the ruled. It set the stage for the development of constitutional monarchy and the rule of law, principles that continue to underpin British democracy. The echoes of this conflict can still be felt today, a testament to the enduring power of ideas and the quest for a just society. The legacy of the English Civil War is evident in the modern British state, where the balance of power between the government and its citizens remains a central theme in political discourse. From the halls of Parliament to the streets of London, the impact of this historical struggle continues to shape the nation's identity and values.